our start points. It was just a matter of exchanging ideas so that we come up with the optimal level in terms of the division of revenue bill. And Honorable Speaker, as has been misconstrued before, mediation, we don't meet because we are putting on different sides. We meet because we are looking for the best option for the country. And that is why even when the mediation sessions were very heated, Honorable Speaker, we were able to conduct all the sessions with a lot of decorum, and of course based on the fact that we were looking for the best figure for our counties, but also that what the country would afford, Honorable Speaker. The genesis of this process, Honorable Speaker, is that we came to this house in the around mid of this year. We passed what we call the budget. What we usually call the budget is the appropriations bill, Honorable Speaker. And after that, Honorable Speaker, is that we went ahead and we had already passed the division of revenue bill. Honorable Speaker, there needs to be alignments between the appropriations bill, the division of revenue bill, Honorable Speaker, and also CARA. And Honorable Speaker, then the predicament in the mediation committee this time was that this was a time unprecedented. There has never been a situation where we are meeting to revise the division of revenue bill downwards. All the time, if there has been any variation, has been enhancement. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, the first question that we had to scratch our heads to get the answer is the process at which we need to arrive at this, at the figure we ended up arriving at, Honorable Speaker. And I say so because, Honorable Speaker, when we amend the division of revenue bill, that has to also go in tandem with CARA. Honorable Speaker, as it has now, CARA already has a memoranda from the President. And therefore we need to pronounce ourselves on that. And it needs to that majority in both houses. That is the National Assembly, but also, Honorable Speaker, the Senate. And we, first of all, had to find a pathway that even before we talk about the content, we needed to be sure that the pathway after the conclusion of the mediation committee will be anchored in law and will be anchored in the documents that you've already passed. To cut the long story short is that, Honorable Speaker, in terms of the pathway, the mediation report that we are passing today, Honorable Speaker, has a figure of 387 billion Kenya shillings. Last financial year, Honorable Speaker, the shareable revenue to our counties was around 385 billion Kenya shillings. But Honorable Speaker, the version that we amended in this house after what happened in the country in July is that we actually passed here 380 billion Kenya shillings. But in the budget now, it appears like the counties are getting 410 billion Kenya shillings. In the previous one that we passed, Honorable Speaker. But this is so because there were carryovers of 30 billion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker, and therefore the shareable revenue of 380 plus the 30 carryovers, that is what now reflects in the current budget of Kenya shillings, 410 billion shillings. Honorable Speaker, I'm saying this so that members can also appreciate also the figure that we have and also the modalities around it. But then, this is the issue, Honorable Speaker. The version that we are passing today, and I'm beseeching this House to pass, reflects a figure of 387 billion shillings. But, Honorable Speaker, the appropriations bill that we passed, that is supplementary one, shows that that figure is 380 billion. Honorable Speaker, we also have CARA, which we had forwarded to the President with a figure that was previously there of 400.1 billion shillings, but was sent back with a memoranda, Honorable Speaker, and to overturn that memoranda from the President, we require that this House has to have 2/3 majority, and also the Senate has to have 2/3 majority. All these things are important for members to know that even after here, there is some process to go. Honorable Speaker, in arriving at this figure, we have several figures which I want to mention. The figure that we had passed in the budget, in the appropriations bill, was 400.1 billion shillings. The figure we ended up passing in supplementary one is 380 billion Kenya shillings. The figure that the Senate were requesting that we sustain is the 400.1 billion Kenya shillings. But Honorable Speaker, now we have a figure of 387 billion Kenya shillings, which is an enhancement from last financial year of around 2 billion shillings, but an enhancement from what was already passed in this House, Honorable Speaker, of 7 billion, because we had passed 380 billion Kenya shillings. But Honorable Speaker, this figure also is higher than what is required constitutionally. Constitutionally, Honorable Speaker, the shareable revenue should form around not less than 15% of the revenues in the last audited, Honorable Speaker. As it is now before us, Honorable Speaker, we are now doing over 24% of the last audited revenues, Honorable Speaker, which is thus to show that this House supports devolution, as our brothers and sisters in the Senate also do. And that is why even when we met, there was no acrimony, because we all knew that the monies that are going to our counties are still going to serve the Kenyan people. The monies that are going to our constituencies also goes to serve the same Kenyan people. And therefore, there was no point of belaboring the point so deeply about who supports and who does not support devolution. All of us in this House have shown in the past, are showing now, that the National Assembly supports devolution. The Senate also in the Mediation Committee, Honorable Speaker, we were all reading from the same page that there is no contestation, Honorable Speaker, that we all support devolution, and that is why we were able to conclude this issue in a very amicable manner. Honorable Speaker, there was also another clause we had put in the initial report, that when there is a shortfall of revenue, that the national government and the county governments were to bear that shortfall, Honorable Speaker, in a manner that reflects their initial figures, what I would call proportionately. But Honorable Speaker, after deliberations, there is something we have seen very consistent in this country, where the National Treasury sets targets, revenue targets. But for the last 10 years, Honorable Speaker, we have never, even 1 year, met our revenue targets. And we decided in the Mediation Committee that what we have been advising the National Treasury, even as a House, that they need to give projections of revenue that are in tandem with reality. Because there are ramifications of that. When you give a very high target, which then you don't end up meeting, what we end up doing by the close of the year is to enlarge the debt, or having so many projects unfunded by the lapse of the year on the 30th of June. It is the same reason, Honorable Speaker, that by the last financial year, the country was not able to fund projects worthy Kenya shillings 218 billion shillings. And what we were only able to carry over as a country, Honorable Speaker, was only the 30 billion for counties, a retrobate for CDF, and a retrobate for pensions, which was just around 60 billion. All the other monies, Honorable Speaker, are projects, and especially developmental, that ended up unfunded by the lapse of the financial year. What we need to do to make a credible budget is to come up with revenue targets that reflect reality. And for that reason, Honorable Speaker, the Mediation Committee deleted that clause, that when there is a revenue shortfall, the people who set revenue are not the county governments. It is the National Treasury. And the National Treasury represents the executive or the national government, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, in our report, we have decided that the counties can no longer be able to carry a burden which they were not part of the creation. And therefore, when there is a shortfall in revenue targets, it is only the national government, as has always been there before, to carry the entire burden, because that burden cannot be carried by the county governments because they are not even the authors of these revenue targets, Honorable Speaker. And this also makes our county assemblies to do budgets that are not moving targets. When we give them, Honorable Speaker, figures that may change, we are just basically telling our county assemblies to pass budgets that may actually not be fulfilled. And that is why we have decided to delete that clause, so that in case of a revenue shortfall, the National Treasury that actually sets those targets, Honorable Speaker, it is therefore, being a representation of the national government, it is the national government alone to carry the burden of revenue shortfall. Honorable Speaker, the other thing that I want to highlight is that besides this bill that is before us, before this motion that is before us, there is already another mediation, Honorable Speaker, which will actually be meeting for the first time tomorrow. Because the conditional allocation to our counties also, they also need to be mediated. Because the figure that we passed in this House and the figure passed by the Senate has some discrepancies. And Honorable Speaker, I would beseech this House, because I know the undercurrents around the issues we were discussing. Those undercurrents are better handled in the next mediation, because it is the conditional grants are the ones that have sectoral allocations, even like the RMLF, and therefore this division of revenue has got absolutely nothing to do with RMLF. It is the next report, Honorable Speaker, that then contains that. And I hope maybe by that time we will exercise our debate on that matter during that debate, because that is where it is domiciled. However, Honorable Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to thank our county governments. I wish to thank our governors. They have been doing a credible job. They have been trying their best under the circumstances that we are in terms of the finances. And the more the reason, Honorable Speaker, that there is no need for any house, for any leader to fight the other, because we are all pulling on the same side. When CDF does classrooms for JSS, and our counties support our healthcare, and even county governments come together with the national government to collaborate in other functions, like the industrial parks and the others, all this collaborative manner, Honorable Speaker, only serves the justice of serving the people of Kenya. And that is why, under our watch, we have refused, Honorable Speaker, to disenfranchise ourselves as the mediation committee in terms of pointing figures on anyone. Because the situation we find ourselves, financially speaking, is not a creation of anyone. It is just a creation of the economy as it is, Honorable Speaker. And that is why we were able to come to a very good conclusion. Honorable Speaker, this issue, because I know the governors expected more than we could, that could be delivered. Honorable Speaker, this issue of shortfalls in revenue is also reflected in the own source revenues of our county governments themselves. Because, you know, national government collects revenue, but also our county governments also collects revenue. Honorable Speaker, even when the Commission for Revenue Allocation tries to project their own source revenue, it always has shortfalls. Because, Honorable Speaker, it is understandable that when there is a shortfall on one side, it is likely to be symmetrical, because we are dealing with the same economy. And the same, Honorable Speaker, that the way we find ourselves not meeting targets on this front, even on the county governments, it is the same, Honorable Speaker. And this calls all of us, this House, the county assemblies, the National Treasury, the CECs for finance in our county governments. I think it is better to project less than more, because it's better to deal with a surplus when it appears than to deal with a deficit when it accentuates itself, like in this situation, Honorable Speaker. Because This is how it happens, Honorable Speaker, just for a snapshot. When we pass a budget, like the one we have of 3.88 trillion Kenya shillings, on one side there is revenue. On the other side there is expenditure. But you know, government is a revolving door. When I had not joined this committee, Honorable Speaker, I used to think, for example, that the pensions that the civil servants are paid, I used to think there is a bank account that when you are a civil servant and you are deducted, that your money is deposited. Honorable Speaker, I am sure most people that is what we think. But there is no such a kitty, Honorable Speaker. Government is a revolving door. That even pension itself that is deducted, there is no granary of pension, for example. All these monies are the monies we collect as taxes every day. So that even a person who retired 15 years ago, there is no money in any bank account that they were deducted. It is the taxes we are collecting today that pays their pensions today, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, I was trying to talk about the hierarchy. When the National Treasury receives revenue, the number one thing that they pay is CFS, especially interest rates in debt. The second thing they pay, Honorable Speaker, it is the salaries for the civil servants. Honorable Speaker, the other thing they pay is the pensions. The other thing, Honorable Speaker, is the recurrent. The last thing that ends up being funded by the National Treasury when we collect revenue is development, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, when there is a shortfall in revenue, as it was projected, all that shortfall in most cases is borne by the development kitty. And that is why, Honorable Speaker, we are requesting the National Treasury, even in this report, they project revenues that are cognizant or reflect reality so that we don't find ourselves in years that lapse without projects being funded adequately and fully. Otherwise, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank you and thank all the members of the Mediation Committee, both in the National Assembly and Senate. I want to thank the leadership of this House, Honorable Speaker, and I want to request the Majority Leader, Honorable Kimani Ichungwah, to second this motion.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Allow me first to thank our Chair, Budget and Appropriations Committee, who also was co-chairing the Mediation Committee between us and the other House, and all the members of this House and the Senate who engage in this very rigorous mediation process. Honorable Speaker, every mediated bill is a question of big give and take, and I must thank even the senators who had otherwise taken a very intransigent position or standing with governors to ask for 400 billion. And I must thank them for eventually seeing the light and